Seatbelt driving again, Sarah? Jake's teasing voice sliced through the Brooklyn air as he leaned against the passenger door of my car, a grin playing on his lips. I looked up from the driver's seat where I'd been wrestling with a seatbelt that was having none of it. Hilarious, I said, yanking at the strap again. It's stuck. Been at it for 10 minutes. Jake chuckled, his dark eyes sparkling with amusement. Scoot over, he said, opening the door and gesturing for me to move. Let a professional handle this before you break a nail. I hesitated. Jake Close was always a complication, but the seatbelt wasn't magically fixing itself. Jake had this way of solving problems, a casual ease that somehow made me feel both grateful and slightly inadequate. Fine, I conceded, sliding back. But easy does it, it's... Before I could finish, he was in the car, leaning over me, reaching for the recalcitrant seatbelt. The space between us vanished. I felt his heat, the clean, woodsy scent of his cologne wrapping around me. His arm brushed my shoulder as he worked at the jammed buckle. I held my breath, suddenly hyper-aware of every inch of him. There's your culprit, he muttered, his voice low as he tugged at the strap. His face was inches from mine, and when he glanced at me, our eyes locked. It felt like an eternity. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. I nodded quickly, looking away. Just hurry up. Jake smirked, but didn't say anything, focusing back on the seatbelt. A few seconds later, a triumphant click. Ta-da, he declared, sitting back, still too close for comfort. Good as new. Thanks, I said, my voice quieter than intended. He didn't move, his gaze lingering on me, his expression unreadable, but charged with something I couldn't name. My heart was doing a ridiculous tap dance, and I hated how much I wanted to stay in that moment, to lean in. Shouldn't we get going? I asked, forcing lightness into my tone, glancing at the clock. Jake blinked, as if snapping out of a trance. Right. Yeah, let's roll. The car ride was different. Usually, Jake filled the silence with stories or playful banter that always made me laugh. Tonight, he was quiet, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tight. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but I was afraid of the answer, afraid of what it might mean. So I stared out the window, pretending not to notice his eyes flicking towards me every so often, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. By the time we reached the party in the Hamptons, an uneasy truce had settled between us. Jake opened my door, his hand brushing mine as he helped me out. A brief touch, but it sent a jolt up my arm that I couldn't ignore. Thanks, I whispered. He nodded, his gaze holding mine a beat too long. Anytime. As we walked towards the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something I wasn't ready to confront. Later that night, in bed, the moment in the car replayed in my head, his arm brushing mine, the heat of his body so close, the intensity in his eyes. It was too much. I told myself it was nothing, imagining things, reading too much into a simple act. But deep down, I knew better. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. Jake didn't stay away for long. The morning after the party, I was tidying up the living room when a knock came. My heart jumped. A silly reaction, but a thrill ran through me as I opened the door to find him standing there, a confident grin on his face. Morning, he said, holding up a paper bag. Coffee run. Morning, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. You didn't have to. He shrugged, stepping inside like he owned the place. Just happened to be passing by. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, taking the coffee. I wasn't sure why he was here so early, or why my chest felt tight with anticipation and unease. Jake didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and was ignoring it. He settled onto the couch, stretching out, and gestured for me to sit. So, big plans for today? He asked, his tone casual. Just cleaning, I replied, sitting across from him. The usual. Let me help, he said, leaning forward. I don't need help, I said quickly. Maybe not, he said, his voice softening. But you don't always have to do everything alone. There was something in his tone, gentle but firm, that made my chest tighten. I looked away, focusing on the coffee cup. I'm fine, Jake, I said quietly. Are you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question caught me off guard. When I looked up, his eyes were steady on mine. No teasing, no playful charm, just serious concern. I'm fine, I repeated, but the words sounded hollow. Silence stretched between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. Jake leaned back, his gaze never leaving mine. You know you can talk to me, right? He said after a moment. I know, I replied, softer now. Good, he said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. Because I'm not going anywhere. Simple words, but they carried a weight that left me speechless. I nodded, unable to think of anything to say, and sipped my coffee to hide the sudden flush. The morning turned into afternoon. Jake stayed. We tackled some old boxes in the attic, joking about dusty relics and laughing more than I had in weeks. Once, reaching for the same box, our hands brushed. A small thing, but the warmth of his touch sent a shiver through me. I glanced at him, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. "Sorry," he said softly, not pulling away. "It's okay," I said quickly, stepping back. But the moment lingered, the air charged. Later, on the stoop, iced tea in hand, Jake leaned back in his chair, gazing at the street. "You know," he said, thoughtful, "it's nice being here with you." Surprised, I glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he shrugged. I feel like I can be myself here, like I don't have to pretend." His words resonated. My chest tightened. "That's a good thing," I said softly. "Yeah," he said, his gaze shifting to mine. "It is." For a moment, we just looked at each other, the silence filled with something I couldn't name. When Jake left that evening, the brownstone felt quieter. I stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the street, the feeling that something was changing between us impossible to ignore. It wasn't nothing. I wasn't imagining things. Jake wasn't just David's son anymore. He was Jake, kind, charming, attentive, making me feel seen, alive in a way I hadn't in years. And no matter how hard I tried to deny it, I couldn't ignore how he made me feel. The days that followed were a slow unraveling. Jake kept finding reasons to stop by. Groceries I didn't ask for, fixing things that didn't need fixing, staying just long enough to make my heart race. He filled the silence with easy conversation, his voice a warm, steady presence, making the house feel less empty. But it was the moments between words, the lingering glances, the brush of his hand, the way he stood just a little too close, that made it impossible to ignore what was happening. I tried to tell myself it was kindness, attentiveness, the way he'd always been. But deep down, I knew better. One evening, Jake called from outside. "I'm downstairs," he said, his voice calm but with an edge. "Thought you might want to go for a drive." "A drive?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah," he said. "Nice night, clear skies. Head down by the river." I hesitated. The thought of being alone in the brownstone felt unbearable. "Give me 5 minutes," I said, hanging up before I could overthink it. The drive was quiet at first. Soft music played. Jake's hands gripped the wheel like he was holding onto something heavier than the car. When we reached the Hudson, he pulled onto a dirt road leading to a secluded spot by the water. The moon hung low, reflecting on the river. Jake turned off the engine, leaned back, staring at the water. "Used to come here with Dad," he said softly. "Fish, sit by a fire, peaceful." I nodded, my chest tightening at the mention of David. "He loved this place," I said, voice barely a whisper. Jake turned, expression unreadable. "So did you," he said. The weight of his words hung in the air. I turned away, staring at the river, but felt his gaze, steady, unyielding. After a while, Jake got out, walked to the water. I followed. Cool night air brushing my skin as I stepped onto the grass. He stood, hands in pockets, staring at the river. "Been thinking a lot lately," he said, voice quiet but firm. "About what?" I asked, though I knew. "About you," he said simply. My heart pounded. I looked down. "Jake, I know what you're going to say," he interrupted, stepping closer. "It's complicated, wrong. I don't care." I faced him, breath catching at the intensity in his eyes. "You should care," I said, voice trembling. "Why?" he asked, soft but insistent. "Because people might not understand. It doesn't fit." "Yes," I said, the word hollow. Jake reached for my hand, gentle but firm. "Do you feel it too?" he whispered. I closed my eyes, chest tightening, tried to deny it. Impossible. "Yes," I admitted, voice cracking. The admission hung in the air, heavy, electric. Jake stepped closer, his free hand brushing my cheek. My defenses crumbled. "Then stop fighting it," he said softly. Before I could think, his lips met mine. Tender, urgent. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer. I melted into him. The world faded. No guilt, doubt, fear, only his touch, his heartbeat against mine, the overwhelming sense of being alive. When we pulled away, breathless, hands gripping his arms, Jake rested his forehead against mine, hand still holding me tight. "This is crazy," I whispered, voice trembling. Maybe, he said, lips brushing my temple. But it's real. Shivers. He was right. Real. Terrifyingly, undeniably real. The drive back was quieter. Jake kept his hand on the gear shift, fingers brushing mine. Every time my heart skipped a beat, but I didn't pull away. At my brownstone, he walked me to the door, hand lightly on my back. You okay? He asked softly, gaze searching mine. I nodded, though my thoughts were anything but calm. See you tomorrow, he smiled, a smile that ached in my chest. You couldn't stop me if you tried. That night, in bed, his hands on my skin, his voice saying my name, the way he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world. Dangerous, wrong, but the most alive I'd felt in years. Next evening, Jake showed up unannounced. Dinner was done, the house quiet except for the dishwasher. I opened the door, saw him, hair tousled by the wind, and felt that jolt in my chest. You didn't call, I said softly, stepping back. Didn't think I needed to, he replied, voice calm, an undertone that sent shivers. Bottle of wine in hand, a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Company? I hesitated, fingers tightening on the door, but I didn't want to be alone. Not tonight. Glasses, I said, leading him to the kitchen, living room, wine on the coffee table. Jake poured, slow, deliberate. The way he looked at me handing the glass, pulse quickened. To what are we toasting? I asked, voice unsteady. He leaned back, glass in hand, a small, knowing smile. To honesty, he said simply. I swallowed hard, feeling his gaze. Honesty, I repeated, raising my glass. We drank in silence, lamp glow casting warm shadows. I focused on anything but him. Clock ticking, wind outside, impossible to ignore the tension. You're quiet, he said, breaking the silence. Tired, I replied, though we both knew it wasn't true. Liar, he said softly, teasing tone, serious eyes. I looked away, fingers tightening on my glass. Jake, don't push me away, he interrupted gently. His words hung, heavy, unrelenting. I set my glass down, hands trembling, looked at him. Vulnerability in his expression undid me. Not trying to push you away, I said quietly. Just don't know what to do with this. This? He repeated, leaning forward. What is this, Sarah? Tell me. I hesitated, words catching. But his patient, unyielding gaze made it impossible to deny what we both knew. Something I can't ignore, I admitted finally. Then don't, he said simply. Before I could think, he reached across, hand covering mine. Warmth shocked me, breath hitched as his thumb traced circles on my knuckles. You're allowed to want this, he said softly. To want me. Raw honesty broke something inside me. Before I could stop, I leaned forward, lips capturing his. Hesitant at first, quickly deepened. Jake didn't hesitate, hand moved to my neck, pulling me closer. I gave in completely. World faded, only his touch, soft lips, overwhelming aliveness. Somehow, bedroom. Couldn't remember getting there. Only his hands on me, reverence that ached my heart. He paused, forehead against mine. Are you sure? I nodded, hands gripping his shirt. Yes, I said, voice barely audible. A blur of warmth, connection, every touch, kiss, weaving intimacy, no doubt. Jake, patient, attentive, looked at me like I was the only thing. Tears pricked my eyes. First time in years I felt seen, truly, deeply seen. Afterwards, tangled together, bedside lamp glow, Jake's arm around my waist, fingers tracing patterns on my skin. Are you okay? He asked softly, voice low, soothing. I nodded, head resting against his chest. I think so, I said, though my mind was a whirlwind. Don't have to decide anything now, he said, lips brushing my temple. Just know I'm here, no matter what. Tears welled, closed eyes tight, held on to the moment, but dawn crept in, reality settled. Weight of what we'd done pressed down. Questions swirled. Jake stirred beside me, eyes fluttering open, soft smile, hand brushing my cheek. Morning, he said, voice rough with sleep. Morning, I replied, voice trembling slightly. Unease in my voice, smile faded, gaze searched mine. You okay? I don't know, I admitted, voice barely a whisper. Later by the window, watching him drive away, the brownstone felt quieter than ever. Wrapped arms around myself, memory of his touch still lingering. Crossed a line. Uncrossable. Weight of that realization suffocating. But beneath fear, doubt, something else. Flicker of hope. Fragile, insistent. First time in years, felt like standing on the edge of something new. Terrifying, wonderful. Day after, couldn't focus. Hands trembled folding laundry, Jake's touch vivid against my skin. Every room echoed with his presence. Mine replayed last night. Crossed a line never thought I'd cross. Part of me alive in a way I hadn't in years. But guilt, uncertainty pressed down like stone. Phone buzzed on the counter, jumped, nearly dropped the shirt. Jake. "Can I see you later?" Stared at the message, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to say no, time to think, breathe, but thought of him, the way he'd looked at me, impossible to resist. Okay. He arrived that evening, sun dipping below horizon. Open door, found him. Expression calm, serious. "Hi," I said softly, stepping back. "Hi," he replied, equally quiet. Moment of silence, heavy but not uncomfortable. Jake broke it. "You okay?" he asked, gaze searching mine. "I don't know," I admitted, voice trembling. Conflicted. "I get that," he said, stepping closer, "but I don't regret it, not for a second." Honesty tightened my chest, looked away. "Jake, this is so complicated," I whispered. "Only if we let it be," he said, voice steady. We sat on the couch. Jake leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Talk to me," he said. "Tell me what you're thinking." Hesitated, hands twisting in my lap. "I'm scared," I admitted finally. "Of what?" he asked gently. "Of everything," I said, voice breaking. "What people will think, what this means, losing you." "You're not going to lose me," he said firmly, hand covering mine. "I'm here, Sarah. Not going anywhere." Certainty teared me up. "How can you be so sure?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. "Because I know what I want," he said simply. "And I want you." Before I could respond, Jake reached out, fingers brushing my cheek. Touch gentle, tender, breath caught. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said softly. "But don't push me away either." Words broke something inside. Before I could stop, I leaned into him, forehead resting against his. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "We'll figure it out," he said, voice steady. When his lips met mine, kiss slow, deliberate, reassuring. Hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer. I gave in completely. World faded, only his touch, heartbeat. We moved together like last night, but different, more deliberate, certain. Every kiss, touch, reminder I wasn't alone, didn't have to carry doubts alone. Afterwards, tangled together on the couch, lamp glow, Jake's arm around my shoulders, fingers tracing patterns. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, voice low, soothing. I nodded, head resting against his chest. "I think so," I said, though mine still a whirlwind. "Don't have to be scared," he said, kissing top of my head. "We'll take it one step at a time." Words meant to comfort, but weight of what we'd done impossible to ignore. Days that followed, quiet moments, unspoken tension. Jake visited, constant reassurance. Comforting to have him near, but fear lingered. What if someone found out? What would people say? One evening, on the stoop, Jake turned, expression serious. "Been thinking," he said. "About what?" I asked, chest tightening. "About us," he said. "What this means." Looked away, fingers twisting. "Not that simple, Jake," I said softly. "Can be," he said, "if we let it." Words stayed with me. He was right. Only thing standing in our way, my fear. Letting go felt impossible. Cliff edge, no safety net. Next time Jake came, no groceries, toolbox, a question. "What do you want, Sarah?" he asked, voice steady, emotion. "Not what you think you're supposed to want. What do you actually want?" Simple question, not simple answer. Looked at him, chest tightening, tried to find words. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Then figure it out," he said, hand covering mine. "Because I'm not going anywhere, and I'll wait, as long as it takes." As he left, watched his car disappear down the street. Brownstone quieter than ever, weight of his words settling over me. Didn't know what I wanted, but couldn't keep running. Morning after Jake's visit, woke to quiet house. Sunlight through curtains, warmer than usual, but heaviness in my chest. His question, mind. "What do you actually want?" Years, lived life according to others' expectations. David's wife, stepmother, family glue. In Jake's gaze, a challenge to break free. But courage? Didn't know if I had it. Spent day busy with chores, avoided doubt, fear, Memories crept in. Jake's hands, soft voice, way he looked at me. By sunset, breaking point. Couldn't live in limbo. Picked up phone, dialed Jake's number, answered first ring. Sarah? Voice calm, concern. Can you come over? Voice trembling slightly. 10 minutes, he said, no hesitation. Jake arrived quickly. Open door, he stepped in, no invitation, eyes searching mine. What's wrong? Voice steady, gentle. Nothing, I said softly, stepping back. Just needed to see you. Relief washed over him, nodded, lips curved, faint smile. I'm here. Living room, couch, knee brushing mine, closeness comforting, grounding, first time in days, could breathe. Been thinking about what you said, I began, voice barely whisper. Jake turned, gaze intent. And, you're right, I admitted, throat tightening. Spent so much time worrying about others, right and wrong, forgot to ask myself what I actually want. His hand found mine, fingers laced. Simple, profound, chest ached. And what do you want? He asked softly. Deep breath, heart pounding. I want this, I said, voice trembling. I want you, but I'm scared, Jake. Don't know how to do this. We'll figure it out, he said, voice steady, reassuring. Together. Moment of silence, confession settling. Jake leaned forward, forehead against mine. You're not alone, he whispered. Don't have to do this alone. Tears spilled, closed eyes let his words wash over me. First time in years felt like I could let go. Guilt, fear, expectations. Opened eyes, Jake watching, expression open, unguarded. I'll follow your lead, he said softly. Whatever you decide, I'm here. That night, on the couch, realized the answer had been there all along. What I wanted wasn't just him. Freedom to live my life, embrace love growing between us, no matter how unconventional. Didn't know the future, but not afraid to find out. A week later, Jake suggested weekend trip. Just us. Fresh start, he called it, eyes bright. Hesitated at first, doubts lingering, but looked at him. Steady reassurance, flicker of courage. Okay, I said finally. His smile, immediate. Pulled me into his arms, heart lighter than years. Day of the trip, by the window, watching Jake load car, house quiet. But silence didn't feel oppressive. Stepped outside, sunlight warmed skin, sense of hope. Jake held car door, smile soft promise. Ready? He asked. Nodded, chest tightening, anticipation, possibility. Let's go, I said, stepping into car, buckling seatbelt. This time, didn't need him to fix it.